Sabrina Wallace had never been a woman who left anything to chance. In her line of work, perfection wasn't just a goal, it was an expectation. As the owner and head pâtissière of Étoile, an exclusive boutique bakery catering to the city's most elite clientele, she had built her reputation over a decade of relentless dedication, artistry, and an uncompromising attention to detail. Her creations were not merely desserts, they were culinary sculptures, meticulously crafted with rare imported ingredients and techniques honed from years of training in Europe. Among those in the know, politicians' wives, tech moguls, old money families, securing a commission from Sabrina was a status symbol in itself, which was precisely why this particular wedding cake mattered more than most. It was not only for the daughter of federal Judge Hugh Morton, a client whose professional integrity was matched only by his fierce protection of his family's privacy, but also a gateway to an even more rarefied circle of referrals. Sabrina knew that one flawless execution at this wedding could ensure a calendar booked years in advance. She had planned every element with obsessive precision. The cake, a towering 7-tiered structure inspired by the bride's favorite 19th-century French porcelain, had taken over 3 weeks to conceptualize, 15 days to execute, and had been stored in her private, climate-controlled kitchen under constant surveillance. The ingredients had been flown in from 6 different countries. The edible gold filigree alone had required overnight shipping and a delicate application that took her a full 12-hour shift. Every flower was hand-piped, every tier perfectly balanced. She had initially contracted a specialized temperature-controlled courier service to handle the delicate final delivery to Willow Heights, an ultra-private residential and country club community known both for its opulence and its insularity. But the night before the wedding, a call had come from the courier's manager. Their assigned driver had been hospitalized after a household accident. No replacement with the proper certifications could be dispatched on such short notice. Sabrina had weighed her options and, true to her nature, refused to compromise. She would drive the cake herself. Her van, a modified Sprinter equipped with medical-grade refrigeration, was fully capable of handling the load. Sabrina prepared meticulously, calibrating the temperature 3 times, securing the cake within a custom frame bolted to the vehicle floor. She verified her clearance with the event coordinator for Willow Heights, Danielle Pierce, who assured her that her name and license plate had been submitted to the community's main gate, and that staff would be expecting her delivery mid-morning, 5 hours ahead of the scheduled reception. Confident, Sabrina departed Étoile at dawn. The approach to Willow Heights was as she remembered, a winding, manicured road that gradually transitioned from public streets into a shaded private drive flanked by ivy-covered stone walls. At the main entrance, the wrought iron gates, an imposing emblem of the community's exclusivity, stood open. But what struck Sabrina immediately was the absence of the usual gate attendant. Instead, a lone figure, Victor Howell, stood beside the checkpoint booth. She recognized him at once from previous industry whispers. Isitu Howell was the current president of Willow Heights Governing Board, a man with a reputation for enforcing the community's bylaws with an iron fist and considerable personal discretion. More troubling was the undercurrent of political tension Sabrina had gleaned from Danielle's offhand remarks. Victor and Judge Morton had a long-standing enmity rooted in a failed zoning appeal over neighboring land that Victor had sought to privately acquire. Sabrina eased the van to a stop, engine idling. Howell approached with a thin, unreadable smile. He was impeccably dressed for mid-morning. Navy blazer, silk tie, cufflinks that glinted faintly in the sunlight. "Good morning, Ms. Wallace," he said without preamble. The familiarity in his tone unsettled her. She had not introduced herself. "I understand you're here with a delivery." Sabrina, ever composed, returned the smile. "Yes, scheduled with the event team, fully cleared." She provided her documents, driver's license, delivery manifest, insurance waiver. Victor perused them lazily, as though humoring a formality. "I see," he murmured, eyes lingering on the manifest. "However, there appears to be a procedural discrepancy. Per Willow Heights' updated vendor access protocols, a delivery of this nature requires a secondary inspection to ensure all materials meet community safety and quality standards, particularly for items entering the food service areas." Sabrina blinked. There had been no mention of such a requirement. She referenced the clearance email from Danielle on her phone, offering to contact her directly. Victor's expression remained neutral. "I'm afraid I cannot permit you to proceed until the inspection is complete," he said smoothly. "If you'd kindly open the rear compartment, I will personally oversee the preliminary check." Reluctantly, aware of the time slipping away, Sabrina complied. She unlocked the reinforced doors and swung them open, revealing the secure containment. Victor stepped forward, gaze sharp. "What an extraordinary piece," he remarked. "A shame to keep it hidden." Without waiting, he motioned to an unseen staff member who had emerged from the side path, a junior groundskeeper Sabrina did not recognize. At Victor's direction, the young man produced a rolling cart. "I'll need you to offload the primary crate here for staging," Victor continued. "I'll arrange for final transport to the venue under our supervision once the inspection clears." Sabrina hesitated. The crate in question was the core structure of the cake. Its integrity depended on stable, vibration-free transport. She voiced her concern firmly. Victor's tone chilled. "Ms. Wallace, failure to comply with the community's protocols will result in your delivery being denied entry. I trust that is not the outcome you wish." Weighing the risks and with no immediate authority to countermand him on site, Sabrina reluctantly allowed the groundskeeper to assist. Under her watchful eye, they carefully transferred the crate to the cart. Victor dismissed the young man with a curt nod. "I'll escort this to the staging area myself," he said. "You may wait here or return to the event office for further updates." Before Sabrina could object, he was already maneuvering the cart along the side path toward the administrative wing of the clubhouse, a restricted area beyond the public event. Facilities. Realizing the untenable position she was in, Sabrina immediately contacted Danielle, relaying the incident in detail. Danielle's alarm was palpable. She confirmed that no such inspection protocol existed under the current event contract, and that Victor's intervention had not been authorized. Within minutes, Danielle was mobilizing internal staff and contacting the club's general manager. Sabrina, meanwhile, documented the exchange with Victor in her delivery log, noting the time and sequence of events. She also contacted her insurance carrier's 24-hour incident reporting line, triggering a formal record of the event, a standard practice she had learned through bitter experience with high-stakes clientele. By now, the atmosphere at the gate had shifted. The usual rotation of security staff returned, visibly uneasy, but none seemed willing to challenge Victor's actions retroactively. The internal channels buzzed with activity as Danielle escalated the issue through club management. What had begun as an inconvenient procedural wrinkle was rapidly escalating into something more serious. For Sabrina, the stakes had crystallized. This was no mere bureaucratic overreach. Victor Howell had orchestrated a deliberate obstruction, one that now threatened not only the success of the wedding, but the integrity of her business's reputation. And if her instincts were correct, it was only the beginning of a deeper, far more personal game, one in which she had been cast as an unwitting pawn. But Sabrina Wallace had not built her empire by folding under pressure. As the minutes ticked past, she methodically prepared her next steps, knowing that precision, documentation, and an unshakable resolve would be her strongest allies in the hours to come. The minutes that followed seemed to stretch endlessly, each one amplifying the tension that was now crackling beneath the surface. Sabrina remained parked near the gate, engine idling, her mind racing through the possible implications of what had just unfolded. She checked the time, Nearly 40 minutes had passed since Victor had wheeled her cake crate out of sight. No call from Danielle. No return of the crate. Her instincts, honed through years of managing high-stakes deliveries and demanding clientele, were now screaming in protest. This was not a misunderstanding, not a procedural fluke. This was intentional. Finally, her phone buzzed. Danielle's voice came through, tight with frustration. "Sabrina, we have a problem," she said bluntly. "I just spoke with Michael Kane, the general manager. He wasn't informed of any new inspection protocols, and Victor has not checked the crate into any official holding area. We've reviewed the surveillance feed from the main corridor. Victor rerouted through the service wing, which is outside of our contracted event space. That wing is under the board's private access, restricted to administrative personnel." Sabrina's grip tightened on the wheel. "So, in plain terms, he's taken the cake into a part of the building where no event staff can legally access it." "That's correct," Danielle confirmed. "And here's the kicker. Michael can't force entry without a board directive. Victor technically holds interim access privileges over that wing. We need formal cause or escalation to security, but he's already anticipated that. He's classified the crate as undergoing board-level review. I'm escalating to Judge Morton's counsel now." Sabrina exhaled slowly, her mind shifting gears. It was worse than she thought. Victor wasn't just posturing. He had deliberately created a legal gray zone around her delivery. And if the crate remained in that space, out of refrigeration, subjected to mishandling or intentional sabotage, the consequences would be catastrophic. Not merely financial, though the cake was insured at a valuation of $25,000, but reputational. Rumors of a failed delivery to such a high-profile wedding would spread like wildfire through her clientele's tight-knit circles. A single blemish could unravel a decade of painstaking brand cultivation. Yet, emotion would serve her nothing here. Precision and process were her only allies now. Without hesitation, Sabrina activated her next line of defense. She placed a call to her legal counsel, Philip Grayson, a seasoned contracts attorney specializing in luxury service industries. Within 5 minutes, Philip had initiated a formal demand notice to Willow Heights administration, citing breach of contract, unlawful detainment of private property, and potential interference with commercial operations. Simultaneously, he filed a preliminary injunction request with the community's legal office, seeking immediate clarification on the board's overreach. In parallel, Sabrina filed an incident report with her insurance provider's Special Investigations Unit, ensuring that a third-party auditor would be assigned to document the chain of custody disruption. These were not performative steps. They were strategic moves designed to create an evidentiary trail that would hold weight in any subsequent arbitration or litigation. Meanwhile, Danielle, acting on her own initiative, discreetly contacted Judge Morton's personal assistant. Within 20 minutes, the judge's security liaison, a retired federal investigator named Alan Brooks, was en route to the property. Unlike the club's staff, Alan carried with him the implicit authority of his employer's federal standing. His presence alone would shift the dynamics of the confrontation. But even as these pieces moved into place, time remained Sabrina's greatest adversary. The structural integrity of the cake was engineered for stable, controlled transport and storage. Prolonged exposure to fluctuating temperatures, vibrations, or improper handling would irreparably compromise its edible elements, not to mention the aesthetics meticulously designed for the bride's specifications. Every passing minute increased the probability of damage. Sabrina weighed the risks. Staying at the gate served no further purpose. She needed proximity to the administrative wing. She notified Danielle of her intent and, with her counsel's concurrence, carefully navigated the van to the clubhouse's vendor lot. Parking within visual range of the service entrance, she began a methodical visual sweep of the area, noting every point of ingress and egress. No sign of Victor. no movement through the expected staff channels. Then a new complication surfaced. Word reached Danielle that Victor had initiated an internal communications blackout in the board wing, citing technical maintenance on the network. This maneuver further isolated the crate, preventing electronic tracking of environmental conditions or staff movement. It was a calculated gambit designed to buy Victor time and further obfuscate accountability should damage occur. At this juncture, Alan Brooks arrived. His presence immediately galvanized the club's senior management. Flanked by Michael Kane and 2 senior staff members, Alan initiated a formal demand for access under the community's operating agreement, citing risk of property damage and potential legal liability. Shoo. The confrontation remained professional, but tense. Victor, communicating only through an assistant, refused entry, claiming the crate was under compliance review and subject to board discretion. Sabrina monitored these developments with clinical focus, maintaining a detailed incident log. Her goal was not to confront Victor directly, that would play into his tactics, but to ensure that every procedural failure was documented and attributable. In the interim, she activated a contingency she had long prepared for, but never thought she would need. She alerted her core pastry team to stand by for an emergency partial reconstruction, utilizing the auxiliary elements and decorative components that remained secured in her van. This decision was not taken lightly. The auxiliary elements included ornamental sugarwork, spare molded accents, and duplicate base structures, components sufficient to fabricate a facsimile if worst came to worst. It would not replicate the full bespoke piece, but it could salvage the visual integrity of the event if Victor's interference rendered the original unusable. Throughout the next hour, the standoff deepened. Alan's formal demand was rebuffed. Michael Kane, now acutely aware of the liability exposure, initiated a special session of the club's executive committee, seeking to override Victor's obstruction. Meanwhile, Sabrina's counsel expanded the legal action, preparing an emergency motion to escalate the matter to county jurisdiction if necessary. Tension rippled through the event staff. The bride's family remained insulated from the crisis for the moment, but Danielle's team worked feverishly to maintain that buffer. Sabrina's focus remained absolute. She double-checked her auxiliary inventory, calibrated her portable refrigeration units, and prepped staging for rapid deployment. Every move was deliberate, calculated. No theatrics, no wasted energy. Then, a subtle shift. Through a discreet channel, Sabrina learned from a sympathetic staff member that Victor had privately convened 2 board allies in the administrative wing. Unconfirmed reports suggested that he was deliberating whether to release the crate in a compromised state, thereby framing any resultant failure as the bakery's liability. It was a reckless gamble, but one consistent with his escalating desperation. Sabrina understood the stakes clearly now. Victor had crossed from bureaucratic obstruction into active sabotage. The path forward required precision and restraint. Any misstep, emotional or procedural, could hand Victor the narrative he sought. But Sabrina Wallace was no stranger to high-stakes brinkmanship. Her resolve, forged through years of navigating the volatile egos of elite clientele, remained unshaken. The hours ahead would demand every ounce of that resolve. The tension inside the service wing of Willow Heights had reached a critical mass by the time the club's executive committee convened in an emergency session. Sabrina remained stationed in her van nearby, maintaining constant communication with Philip, Danielle, and Alan. Each passing minute underscored the precariousness of the situation. With the wedding schedule moving inexorably forward, options were narrowing. At the center of it all, Victor Howell was now playing a game of high-risk brinkmanship. Fully aware of the reputational and legal stakes arrayed against him, yet seemingly emboldened by the insular power dynamics of the club. Philip, leveraging his extensive background in high-end commercial litigation, had already prepared a comprehensive dossier outlining the contractual violations at play. He emphasized to the executive committee that Willow Heights now faced immediate exposure, not only for the unauthorized detention of Sabrina's property, but also for potential interference with a federally connected private event. Allen, bringing the weight of his federal investigative experience to bear, reinforced the urgency of the matter. In tandem, these efforts began to fracture the previously unified front of the board. Meanwhile, Sabrina methodically advanced her contingency preparations. Her pastry team, now operating on an emergency footing, had dispatched a pair of senior assistants to the club with the necessary auxiliary components and reinforcement equipment. Sabrina had cleared space in a secondary staging area adjacent to the main ballroom's service kitchen, ensuring a controlled environment for potential rapid assembly. The decision to activate this contingency had not been taken lightly. Reconstructing even a partial facsimile of the original cake required both precision and composure under pressure, qualities Sabrina's team possessed in abundance, but which would be tested to their limits given the time constraints. Amid this flurry of tactical responses, a new and deeply troubling development emerged. Michael Caine, after pressing for an update from Victor's assistant, received a cryptic response. The crate was now deemed non-compliant for event service and would not be released unless cleared by an independent board-appointed evaluator, a role conveniently unfilled at the time. This maneuver signaled a deliberate escalation. Victor had moved beyond passive obstruction. He now intended to engineer a scenario in which the crate, and by extension Sabrina's bakery, could be publicly discredited. Sabrina's reaction was immediate and clear-headed. She instructed Philip to issue an immediate cease and desist demand, placing the board on notice for anticipatory breach and intentional tortious interference. Simultaneously, she authorized Danielle to notify the bride's father through secure channels. The veil of discretion could no longer be maintained. It was imperative that Judge Morton be made fully aware of the situation before Victor could attempt to control the narrative. Judge Morton's response was both swift and decisive. Within 30 minutes, his personal counsel arrived on site, accompanied by a pair of off-duty federal marshals operating in a private security capacity. Their presence, while technically unofficial, carried undeniable weight. They initiated a formal request for voluntary inspection of the crate's condition and documentation of its current state. Predictably, Victor refused access, citing board privilege and pending evaluation, a stance that now placed him in direct opposition to federal interests connected to a sitting judge. As this standoff unfolded, a separate stream of intelligence reached Sabrina through her network. One of her long-standing suppliers, who maintained informal ties to Willow Heights service vendors, quietly informed her that Victor had made inquiries earlier in the week regarding food service liabilities and vendor insurance coverage. A chilling indication that his actions had been premeditated well in advance of today's events. The implications were stark. This was not an impulsive power play. It was a calculated effort to weaponize procedural minutiae against a targeted party. Sabrina relayed this intelligence to Philip, who immediately expanded the legal scope of their filings to include elements of premeditation and bad faith conduct. Meanwhile, Allen, operating with characteristic efficiency, initiated discreet background checks on Victor's recent board activities and procurement authorizations, seeking patterns of abuse that might bolster the emerging case. Inside the executive session, the atmosphere grew increasingly fractious. Several board members, previously deferential to Victor's authority, now voiced open concern about the legal ramifications and reputational fallout. Under mounting pressure, Michael Caine formally petitioned the board for an override vote to compel immediate release of the crate under third-party supervision. Victor, recognizing the erosion of his position, abruptly adjourned the session without a vote, a blatant procedural abuse that only deepened the club's liability exposure. Outside the formal channels, tension rippled through the event staff. Word of the incident, though carefully managed, could not be entirely contained. A core cadre of senior service staff, loyal to Michael and committed to the club's operational integrity, discreetly offered assistance to Sabrina's team. With their support, Sabrina initiated Phase 1 of her contingency plan, a controlled, expedited assembly of the auxiliary cake structure in the secondary staging area. Every step was meticulously documented. Temperatures logged, handling protocols verified, chain of custody maintained, ensuring that no avenue existed for Victor to later impugn the replacement effort. Even as this operation unfolded, Victor's tactics continued to escalate. He circulated an internal memorandum to select board allies and staff, asserting that the original delivery had failed to meet unspecified safety standards and was being held for further review to protect community health and safety. The language was deliberately vague, crafted to sow doubt and shield his actions under the guise of due diligence. Sabrina's response was clinical. She directed Philip to issue a public demand for retraction and clarification, explicitly warning that any further dissemination of false or defamatory statements would trigger immediate legal action. Concurrently, Alan and Michael coordinated a formal incident report to the club's insurer, preserving the evidentiary chain for subsequent review. As the timeline compressed, Sabrina's focus narrowed to two parallel objectives: ensuring that a presentable, serviceable cake was delivered to the reception on schedule, and preserving the legal and factual record necessary to hold Victor accountable. Her team worked with relentless precision, navigating the formidable technical challenges of constructing a passable facsimile under duress. Sabrina herself supervised every critical step, maintaining a calm, authoritative presence that inspired confidence in all those around her. Through it all, Sabrina remained acutely aware that the battle was not merely for this event, but for the preservation of her professional standing and the integrity of her brand. Victor's gambit, however clumsy in its execution, had been designed to exploit the vulnerabilities of her business model, where reputation was both currency and capital. To counter such an attack required not only legal acumen and operational resilience, but unyielding personal resolve. By late afternoon, the auxiliary cake stood nearly complete, a testament to the skill and tenacity of Sabrina's team. Simultaneously, the club's legal and governance machinery had been set in motion, with multiple avenues of accountability now converging on Victor's position. The standoff had entered a new phase, one in which the balance of power was shifting inexorably away from the rogue president who had sought to turn a personal vendetta into a professional catastrophe. By the time the auxiliary cake had taken its final shape in the staging area, Sabrina could feel the sharp edge of exhaustion creeping into her muscles. But there was no room for faltering now. Every movement still had to be precise, every action deliberate. Her team, operating with a level of focus born from years of shared high-pressure service, moved in perfect synchrony. The final sugar filigree was being applied, the floral accents adjusted, and the temperature stabilization confirmed once more. The replacement structure, while not the flawless original masterpiece that had been weeks in the making, was a remarkable achievement under the circumstances. Beautiful, balanced, and worthy of the presentation at such an esteemed event. Yet Sabrina knew this victory was only partial. The larger battle still raged beyond the walls of the service kitchen. Elsewhere in the clubhouse, the conflict had reached a critical pivot point. Alan, in collaboration with Judge Morton's counsel and the club's legal advisor, had formally escalated the matter to external legal channels. A notice of intent to pursue emergency injunctive relief had been transmitted to the local county court clerk, bypassing the internal stalemate that Victor had engineered within the board. No, the message was clear. If the club failed to resolve the unlawful detention of Sabrina's property immediately, judicial intervention would follow, and with it, public exposure. This looming threat of legal action had already begun to fracture Victor's remaining support among the board's more pragmatic members. The club's legal advisor, recognizing the potential for catastrophic liability, privately urged Victor to release the crate under neutral supervision. But Victor, whether out of hubris or refusal to concede defeat to his old rival Morton, remained defiant. Adding to the mounting pressure, Allen's discreet background inquiries had begun to bear fruit. Preliminary findings revealed that Victor had, over the past 6 months, leveraged his position to manipulate multiple procurement and compliance processes within the club. Patterns of favoritism in vendor selection, irregularities in board meeting documentation, and unauthorized policy revisions were now surfacing. The portrait that emerged was one of a man who had long operated with impunity, until today's incident had drawn unwelcome scrutiny to his methods. Meanwhile, Sabrina remained outwardly composed, even as the strain of the day pressed harder. She monitored each update from Philip and Danielle with clinical detachment, processing the shifting landscape of alliances and threats. Her primary focus remained unchanged, ensuring that the bride's reception proceeded without disruption and that her brand's integrity remained unassailable in the public and professional eye. To that end, she took a crucial additional step, engaging a third-party professional photographer, retained through her insurer's network, to document the completed auxiliary cake in situ. This preemptive move would serve to verify that her replacement product met all aesthetic and safety standards, thereby countering any future attempt by Victor to question its provenance or quality. As the final hour before the reception approached, an unexpected development occurred. A junior staff member from within the board wing, a young assistant who had evidently grown uneasy with Victor's escalating defiance, quietly approached Danielle with critical information. According to this insider, Victor had ordered the original crate moved earlier in the day from its initial holding location to a private storage space deeper within the administrative wing. More disturbingly, during this unauthorized transfer, the crate had been subjected to rough handling, including a tilted maneuver down a service ramp. The likelihood of significant internal damage to the cake was now extremely high. Upon hearing this, Sabrina's response was swift and measured. First, she instructed Philip to amend their legal filings to include this new evidence of willful mishandling. Second, she communicated to her insurer's investigative team, ensuring that they were prepared to dispatch an auditor the moment the crate was eventually recovered. Finally, she relayed the information to Allen and Judge Morton's counsel, further strengthening their case for immediate judicial intervention. The timing of these developments proved pivotal. Just as Sabrina's team completed the final preparations on the auxiliary cake, an urgent notification came through from Danielle. The executive committee, under intense legal and reputational pressure, had voted in an emergency session to override Victor's obstruction. A formal order for the immediate release of the original crate had been issued, to be executed under the direct supervision of neutral club staff and in the presence of Allen and Sabrina's counsel. It was a hard-won breakthrough, yet Sabrina knew better than to celebrate prematurely. When the crate was finally retrieved and brought to a secure inspection area, the extent of the damage quickly became apparent. The once pristine exterior of the custom housing bore clear scuffs and compression marks. Upon careful opening, under full documentation by both club staff and Sabrina's insurer's representative, the interior revealed a grim sight. The upper tiers of the cake had collapsed partially inward, structural supports compromised, intricate sugar elements shattered, and frosting destabilized from temperature fluctuation and mechanical shock. It was a tragic confirmation of what Sabrina had suspected since the moment Victor had seized control of her delivery. Yet even in this moment of justifiable anger, Sabrina's response remained disciplined. She refrained from emotional confrontation, instead directing her team to catalog the damage meticulously, ensuring a complete evidentiary record. With the auxiliary cake already staged and awaiting final placement in the ballroom, she issued a clear directive. The show would proceed without disruption. The bride and her family were to remain insulated from the day's turmoil. Their celebration would be preserved at all costs. As the reception commenced, The auxiliary cake was unveiled to great acclaim from the assembled guests, its elegance and craftsmanship belying the frantic hours that had birthed it. Sabrina, maintaining a poised presence among the event staff, observed the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Her team's professionalism had averted a public catastrophe. More importantly, the legal and factual groundwork laid throughout the ordeal ensured that Victor's actions would not go unanswered. With the immediate crisis contained, attention now shifted to the coming legal reckoning. Sabrina's brand had emerged intact, her professional standing reinforced by her measured handling of the situation. Yet the deeper battle, one that would determine the future governance of Willow Heights and the limits of unchecked board power, had only just begun. The wedding reception progressed with an air of refined elegance, the guests unaware of the high-stakes battle that had played out behind the scenes. Sabrina watched discreetly as the auxiliary cake was unveiled to admiring applause, a testament not only to her team's craftsmanship under pressure, but to her unwavering resolve. Yet, even as the evening unfolded with polished perfection, Sabrina's focus remained sharp. She knew that the public face of success did not diminish the gravity of the offenses committed that day, nor did it mitigate the longer-term risks to her business and professional reputation. The true fight was only beginning, and it would be fought in legal forums and private boardrooms in the days to come. In the hours following the reception, Sabrina and Philip worked tirelessly to consolidate the vast trove of evidence amassed throughout the ordeal. Every detail had been captured. The chain of custody disruptions, the unlawful detention of property, the deliberate mishandling of the original crate, the defamatory communication circulated by Victor, and the club's internal decision-making timeline. Allen's findings regarding Victor's broader pattern of governance abuses were now supplemented by sworn statements from sympathetic staff members, including the young assistant who had first revealed the mishandling incident. Simultaneously, Judge Morton's legal team had taken an increasingly active role in coordinating the response. What had begun as an effort to safeguard a family event had now evolved into a broader campaign to confront and curtail Victor's entrenched influence over the club's governance. Leveraging his considerable legal and political acumen, the judge orchestrated a coalition of concerned members prepared to demand sweeping reforms. But Victor was not one to retreat quietly. Within 24 hours of the wedding, he launched a calculated counteroffensive. An emergency board communication was issued, claiming that the incident with Sabrina's delivery had been the result of a regrettable procedural misunderstanding, stemming from unclear vendor access protocols. The memorandum sought to deflect responsibility from Victor personally, positioning the entire episode as an unfortunate administrative lapse. More insidiously, it insinuated that Sabrina's auxiliary cake had been substituted without appropriate compliance review, an accusation designed to seed doubt about the integrity of her work. Sabrina anticipated this move and had prepared accordingly. At Philip's direction, a preemptive legal demand was served upon both Victor and the club's legal counsel, categorically refuting the false claims and placing them on notice for defamation and business interference. A parallel communication, carefully crafted for Sabrina's clientele and professional network, reaffirmed her commitment to the highest standards of service and transparency. The narrative, in both legal and professional circles, was now shifting decisively in her favor. Meanwhile, the scope of the investigation into Victor's conduct expanded. Allen's network of contacts yielded fresh insights. Victor had, over the past year, systematically manipulated vendor relationships to funnel lucrative contracts toward entities in which he held undisclosed interests. Patterns of retaliatory action against dissenting board members and staff had also emerged, painting a portrait of a deeply corrupt governance structure. These revelations galvanized the reform coalition within the club, emboldening previously silent members to step forward with corroborating testimony. Yet Victor remained defiant, seeking to consolidate his remaining power through a series of back-channel maneuvers. Efforts were made to discredit key witnesses, including the young assistant who had exposed the mishandling of the crate. Threats of professional reprisal were whispered among the staff, and attempts were made to tamper with internal records related to the day's events. Sabrina responded with characteristic precision. Working with Alan and Philip, she secured independent forensic imaging of all relevant electronic records, preserving an unalterable evidentiary trail. Whistleblower protections were arranged for vulnerable staff members, ensuring that their testimony would not be silenced through intimidation. Each new escalation by Victor was met with a calculated, lawful countermeasure, reinforcing Sabrina's position and further eroding Victor's credibility. As the legal and political battle intensified, Sabrina remained a model of professional discipline. She continued to manage her business with the same exacting standards, projecting an image of unshaken composure to her clients and peers. Privately, however, she understood the deeper stakes. This was not merely about personal vindication or even about holding Victor accountable. It was about safeguarding the integrity of her profession and demonstrating that no amount of institutional power could override the rule of law and professional ethics. The turning point came when Philip, in collaboration with Judge Morton's counsel, succeeded in securing a court order mandating full disclosure of the board's communications and decision-making records related to the incident. The discovery process yielded damning evidence. Premeditated plans by Victor to disrupt the delivery, coordinated misinformation campaigns, and explicit discussions of leveraging the incident to undermine both Sabrina's business and the judge's standing within the club. The evidence shattered any remaining pretense of procedural confusion or administrative error. Faced with incontrovertible proof of misconduct, Victor's remaining allies began to desert him. A wave of resignation swept through his inner circle, and a special board session was convened to initiate formal disciplinary proceedings. The atmosphere within the club shifted palpably. The culture of impunity that had shielded Victor for so long was collapsing under the weight of collective outrage and legal scrutiny. Throughout this tumultuous period, Sabrina continued to lead with integrity and strategic foresight. She maintained open communication with her clientele, transparently addressing the incident and reaffirming her unwavering commitment to excellence. Her reputation, far from being tarnished, emerged burnished by her resilience and professionalism. As the formal proceedings against Victor advanced, Sabrina remained engaged but measured. She understood that true accountability required patience and precision. Through Philip's guidance, she pursued not only legal redress for the immediate harms inflicted, but also broader institutional reforms to prevent future abuses. The coalition of reform-minded members, now galvanized by the exposure of Victor's misconduct, championed a comprehensive governance overhaul, ensuring greater transparency, accountability, and member oversight. In the final stages of this transformative battle, Sabrina's role evolved from that of a wronged vendor to a respected advocate for professional ethics and institutional integrity. Her experience became a touchstone within the club and the broader professional community, a testament to the power of principled action in the face of systemic corruption. And through it all, Sabrina remained steadfast in her core belief that excellence, integrity, and the rule of law must prevail over arrogance, deceit, and abuse of power. The battle for Willow Heights had begun with a stolen cake, but its true legacy would be measured in the enduring reforms and renewed ethical standards that emerged from the crucible of conflict. The formal disciplinary proceedings against Victor Howell unfolded with a gravity befitting the magnitude of his offenses. Convened in the Grand Assembly Room of Willow Heights, a space more accustomed to hosting charity galas and board retreats than tribunals, the session drew an unprecedented audience of members, staff, and legal observers. The mood was electric with anticipation, a collective awareness that the insular power dynamics that had long defined the community were now on the cusp of irrevocable change. At the center of it all, Sabrina sat with a composed but vigilant demeanor, flanked by Philip and members of Judge Morton's legal team. Her presence was a living testament to the stakes of the conflict and the resilience required to confront entrenched corruption. The evidence arrayed against Victor was overwhelming. The discovery phase had unearthed a trove of damning communications. Emails detailing the premeditated obstruction of Sabrina's delivery, directives to staff to circumvent established protocols, and explicit attempts to manipulate the narrative after the fact. Financial records revealed a pattern of self-dealing and preferential contracting that extended well beyond the incident with the wedding cake. Whistleblower testimony corroborated these findings, painting a comprehensive portrait of sustained governance abuse. Victor, facing the collapse of his carefully cultivated facade, adopted a defensive posture laced with deflection and procedural obfuscation. He sought to frame the incident as a regrettable misunderstanding, attributing discrepancies to staff errors and miscommunications. But the weight of documented intent and corroborated testimony rendered such defenses hollow. The board members, many of whom had once deferred to Victor's authority, now pressed him with pointed questions, their tone unmistakably one of betrayal and resolve. Throughout the proceedings, Sabrina remained a model of professional decorum. She offered clear, concise testimony regarding the events of that day, meticulously recounting each step she had taken to safeguard her property and uphold her contractual obligations. Her composed demeanor contrasted sharply with Victor's increasingly agitated deflections. Each factual assertion she presented was buttressed by irrefutable documentation, timestamps, photographs, sworn statements, leaving no room for doubt. As the session progressed, the narrative shifted decisively. What had begun as an inquiry into a single incident now revealed a broader pattern of systemic malfeasance. The board, recognizing the imperative for institutional integrity, moved to expand the scope of the proceedings. This development underscored the profound cultural shift underway within Willow Heights, a rejection of the opaque, autocratic governance that had long shielded figures like Victor from accountability. The culmination of this seismic confrontation arrived with the formal vote on disciplinary action. The resolution, drafted in collaboration with legal counsel and subjected to rigorous review, called for Victor's immediate removal from his position as board president, the suspension of his membership privileges pending further investigation, and the referral of pertinent findings to external regulatory and law enforcement agencies. The vote, when called, was decisive and overwhelming, an unequivocal repudiation of Victor's conduct and a mandate for sweeping reform. The moment of Victor's formal censure carried an almost cinematic weight. Stripped of his title and facing the prospect of criminal liability, he was escorted from the assembly room under discreet but unmistakable supervision. The audience, though composed of the community's most reserved and decorous members, could not entirely suppress an undercurrent of relief and vindication. The edifice of impunity had fallen, and in its place emerged a renewed commitment to transparency and ethical governance. For Sabrina, the outcome was both a personal and professional vindication. Yet she remained acutely aware that true justice extended beyond individual accountability. In the days following the proceedings, she worked closely with the Reform Coalition to develop and advocate for a comprehensive governance overhaul. Key provisions included enhanced transparency in board operations, strengthened conflict of interest policies, and formal mechanisms for member oversight and whistleblower protection. Simultaneously, Sabrina pursued appropriate legal remedies for the harms inflicted upon her business. Guided by Philip's strategic counsel, she initiated a civil action against Victor and any complicit parties, seeking damages for defamation, interference with contractual relations, and reputational harm. The strength of the evidentiary record positioned her case for a favorable outcome, reinforcing the broader message that such abuses would not go unchallenged. Throughout this transformative period, Sabrina maintained her unwavering commitment to professional excellence. Her public communications reflected a tone of measured resolve, emphasizing her gratitude for the support of her clients, colleagues, and the many members of Willow Heights who had championed integrity and reform. Far from diminishing her standing, the ordeal had elevated her reputation as a principled and formidable figure within the professional community. As the club embarked on its new chapter, Sabrina remained a respected advisor and ally to the reform movement, her experience serving as both cautionary tale and beacon of resilience. The battle that had begun with a stolen wedding cake had, through unyielding resolve and strategic precision, catalyzed a profound reckoning within one of the region's most storied communities. And while the road to lasting reform would undoubtedly require continued vigilance, Sabrina faced the future with quiet confidence, fortified by the knowledge that integrity, when steadfastly upheld, could triumph even over the most entrenched forces of corruption. In the weeks that followed Victor Howell's removal, the atmosphere at Willow Heights underwent a marked transformation. What had once been an enclave governed by opaque power dynamics and deference to entrenched authority now hummed with an air of cautious optimism. The board, newly constituted with reform-minded members, moved swiftly to implement the governance changes that Sabrina and her allies had championed. Transparency protocols were codified, conflict of interest disclosures were made mandatory, and avenues for member oversight were formalized. The old culture of intimidation and backroom dealings gave way, slowly but perceptibly, to a more accountable and participatory model of leadership. For Sabrina, the conclusion of the formal proceedings and the successful initiation of reforms represented a hard-won validation of her efforts. Yet she remained deeply conscious of the personal and professional toll the ordeal had exacted. The days following the disciplinary vote had been consumed with legal consultations, strategic communications, and the management of client expectations. Each action had required precision and care, lest the fragile gains achieved through months of disciplined advocacy be undermined by misstep or complacency. Through it all, Sabrina's focus remained unwavering. Her business, Étoile, emerged from the conflict not only intact but enhanced in stature. Clients, both existing and prospective, responded to her measured handling of the crisis with renewed respect and loyalty. Orders surged, and high-profile referrals flowed from quarters previously beyond her reach. The very attempt to tarnish her professional reputation had, through her resilience and strategic acumen, become a catalyst for growth. Yet Sabrina was not one to rest on laurels. Recognizing the enduring importance of institutional integrity, she remained engaged with the Reform Coalition at Willow Heights, offering counsel and support as the new governance structures took root. She also deepened her collaboration with industry peers, sharing insights gleaned from her experience to foster broader conversations about ethical standards and professional protections within the luxury services sector. Meanwhile, the civil proceedings against Victor advanced with steady momentum. The weight of evidence and the clarity of the factual record positioned Sabrina's case for a favorable resolution. Settlement discussions commenced, informed by recognition on all sides that a protracted legal battle would only amplify the reputational damage already suffered by the defendants. Sabrina, guided by Philip's counsel, approached these negotiations with the same disciplined pragmatism that had defined her conduct throughout the crisis. The objective was clear: to secure appropriate redress for the harms inflicted while reinforcing the broader principles at stake. As these legal processes unfolded, life at Willow Heights gradually resumed its familiar rhythms, albeit now under a governance structure fundamentally reshaped by the crucible of recent events. The wedding that had once seemed poised for disruption had, in the end, unfolded with grace and beauty, its memory unmarred in the eyes of the couple and their guests. For Sabrina, this outcome remained a quiet source of satisfaction, a testament to the power of preparation, resilience, and principled action. In quieter moments, as she reflected on the arc of the conflict, Sabrina found herself both sobered and strengthened by the experience. The battle had exposed the fragility of institutional safeguards when confronted with determined malfeasance, but it had also affirmed the capacity of principled individuals to effect meaningful change. It was a lesson she would carry forward in all aspects of her professional and civic life. In recognition of her contributions to the reform effort, Sabrina received a personal letter of gratitude from Judge Morton, a gesture that underscored the deep respect she had earned through her conduct. More unexpectedly, she also received an invitation to join the club's newly established Professional Advisory Council, a body tasked with fostering transparency and member engagement. After careful reflection, Sabrina accepted, viewing the role as an opportunity to further the values she had so tenaciously defended. Through it all, she remained grounded in the work that had first defined her career, the pursuit of culinary excellence, the creation of beauty and joy through her craft. The ordeal had tested her in ways she had never anticipated, but it had also deepened her resolve, broadened her influence, and affirmed her belief in the enduring power of integrity. As she stood once more in the serene space of her atelier, overseeing the creation of a new masterpiece, Sabrina felt not triumph or vindication, but a profound sense of purpose. The path she had walked had been arduous, but it had led, in the end, to a place of strength and clarity. And as the delicate scent of vanilla and sugar filled the air, she knew with certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, she would meet them, as always, with precision, resilience, and unwavering grace.